Everybody wants to have the fastest car with the most spacious environment that can drive you at 200 kilometers an hour and that costs you next to nothing and should last forever and have no maintenance. Of course, this is impossible to get everything, but you have to weigh the requirements.
Florian, here's a question. When you're manufacturing a product from Asia, you have different requirements from entrepreneurs, from regulatory people, from engineers, from the end user customers. How are engineers supposed to manage the conflict between all these requirements?
You just mentioned the $1 million question. There are always conflicts. Yeah? Everybody wants to have the fastest car with the most spacious environment that can drive you at 200 kilometers an hour and that costs you next to nothing.
Yeah.
And it should last forever and have no maintenance. Of course, this is impossible to get everything, but you have to weigh the requirements. You have to set priorities. You have to give them levels. And then when you derive the design, you have to cross-check them and benchmark them against requirements. So yes, it's a very difficult job. And there is, especially in the bigger corporations, I call it as a silo thinking. The purchaser only thinks about their purchasing. The engineers only think, I have to meet my requirements. The sales only thinks about meeting their sales target. But actually, they all interfere with each other. And striking the right balance between the different requirements is a very difficult task. But I also believe it's normally the job of the product manager or even the CEO to make the ultimate judgment. The biggest challenge that I can see amongst the manufacturers and amongst people is overpromising. They promise something that in the end they won't deliver, just to save the day.
Right, they want to say something that somebody else wants to hear.
Yeah.
To get a deal signed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then have the compromising. That's why we're always saying, like, in the West, we negotiate and then sign a deal and agree. In Asia, we sign the deal and then we start negotiating. And it's a constant negotiation all the way to the end.
Right.
And there's a cultural difference here. And I would say both sides are not one right or the other. You have always the challenge of limited knowledge. When you start an endeavor, you will always face the situation that you do not know everything. So you have to make assumptions. And you have to accept that your assumptions may not be entirely correct.
But then somebody has their career on the line when something goes wrong.
Yes.
And so you mentioned the responsibility should go on a product manager or the CEO to align the requirements in a certain way and choose the correct sacrifices.
Yeah, but you have to align it with the values of your company.
Right.
And that's especially challenging for those entrepreneurs that try to build a company to flip.
Oh.
And it's very dangerous when the entrepreneur is actually indirectly showing their intent. If you build a company and you plan to sell it in 1.5 years, you may not necessarily care about the output 5 years down the road.
Right. Which means that your entire manufacturing process reflects this goal of flipping it in 1.5 years.
Yes, and that's why also the famous story that out of 10 startups, nine usually fail, because they have, from my point of view, often unreasonable growth expectations. And they're so focused on meeting their growth expectations that they're sacrificing the long-term viability of their products. And in the way, at some stage, they tumble over it.
Yeah. I want to ask your opinion about a very hot topic right now, which are EV cars.
Yeah.
For example, we could talk about Tesla.
Yeah.
Do you think Tesla engineers didn't anticipate how long you could drive a Tesla without it breaking down? Because it sounds like right now there's a lot of issues with maintenance. with these EVs?
Yes, and especially with the battery. I mean, well, I think you know from the publications that the resale value of EVs is way lower than the resale value of ICE cars, integrated combustion engine cars, because the battery occupies just such a huge share of the car. Actually, just 2 days ago, I had an encounter with my little cleaning robot at home. I bought it in 2018. Did me a good job. And I was charging it, and I tried to start it, and it says, sorry, your battery level is insufficient. Please try later. But you can't charge it to the level that it's sufficient. And now it's 2024. It's less than 6 years. This little robot has become a piece of electronic garbage because the lithium-ion battery inside is no longer able to charge to a level so that I can use the robot.
What did you pay for this robot?
More, maybe $400.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
Not cheap. So now you think about it. 6 years, $400, or 5 years, $400. That's $80 a year. That's about 30 cents a day.
Wow.
So think about it. Also, it's 95 cents a day. So roughly 25 cents a day. And did I plan to spend 25 cents a day for my cleaning robot? Which I maybe use every week once?
You probably tried to save money by buying it over the long term.
Yes, but it didn't work because the battery doesn't survive.
Wow.
So it's those kind of calls. And now I would say the battery is not changeable. So it's the maintenance part, I guess, is not valuable to change the battery, because now I can buy maybe a new cleaning robot for $200 whatever dollars. But this intrinsic problem is related to the technology of battery, and of course also the design parameters that are used, how long you can use the battery. And I feel it has not been adequately addressed, because we learn that, let's say, a 2 to 3 year old electrical car, EV car, what's the mileage, the expected mileage of your battery in that period of time of the originally advertised or original startup mileage?
Yeah.
It definitely has decayed. And that's one of the reasons why the resale value of EV cars is dropping so fundamentally.
And then the Tesla stock price has dropped. And so I even read an article that said EVs might be just a phase towards a more sustainable model, for example, hydrogen cars or something else. I mean, we can go into this deeper in this conversation another time. But do you think that EVs are just a phase towards a different model that's going to come in the future?
Frankly speaking, I don't know. However, what I do know is that the current battery technology is not adequately meeting the average Joe, average Jane's actual need.
Right.
So there's a gap between the current technology employed and the expectation of the end user. And I think this is well understood. And I believe there are many, many people working on it. Which technology will eventually make the breakthrough to overcome this problem? I don't know. If there is a battery that can solve that, great. This will create billionaires. But but where and when and how and here, well, the future will tell us.
So in your own business, what is the role of Celinius in helping your clients understand the long-term expectations of the products you're helping to manufacture? I mean, in one sense, it sounds like you have a responsibility to tell them, hey, this is not going to last you forever. But at the same time, there's also conflicting requirements.
Well, and actually, it's okay if it doesn't have to last. Yeah? But let's say let's imagine, look at Airbus, for instance, plane. They know that certain parts are not lasting, but they are not waiting for them to fail and eventually crash the plane. The key thing is, failure itself is not the problem, but unpredictable failure is a big problem.
Right.
So the question is, do you have a concept for predictable maintenance? And then when you know there's a predictable maintenance or a change, you know you need to change the oil of your car. Your oil is not going to last forever, you know, but you can change the oil.
Yeah.
Well, changing the battery is a different story in many cars. Changing the battery in your iPhone is also a problem.
Right. Yeah.
So again, it's about the business model that is built around the application. And all I'm saying is like, have you thought about it? Do you really consider it? But maybe it didn't bother you because you plan to sell your business in 2 years, so you didn't care.
I would like to imagine that most of your clients are in it for the long run, though. Or do you also have quite a few who are just flipping companies?
Yeah, we have, of course, you in the life of a business, you do encounter all kinds of people, and there are also those people. But coming from Germany, and we tend to build things for the long term.
Yeah.
Like in Germany, it's like when you build a house, you expect it to plan for 100 years. 100 years. You will renovate after 30 or 50 years, but the main structure of the house, you usually plan for 100 years.
Us Americans, we buy a house, we flip it 3 months later. Same with like starting companies, selling companies. So it's a totally different way of doing business.
Yes, and it depends, as I said, it depends on whom you're dealing with and what you're doing. Yeah, there was one car company, Flickr, they just went bankrupt. They didn't manage to sell them before they intended to. So it can work, doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and one system doesn't necessarily always work. We had a joke, like saying some of the German machinery is so reliable that the companies went bankrupt because it was too reliable, because they had no spare parts to sell. And the people that bought the machine will never buy a new machine because they can last it forever. Like when I was, one of my partners, I'm in the basement, they have a mechanical workshop. They have drilling machines and NC machines. They're almost 90 years old. They're still working fine.
90 years old.
90 years old. There has been a Second World War going on. It's already passed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the equipment is just so reliable.
Yeah.
And they can be fixed, but that's not so common anymore nowadays.
Right.
Think about your washing machine. Your laundry usually it fails after 8 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And then, that keeps companies alive.
Yeah.